Hey guys, real quick, I just wanted to throw this preface up before we get into the episode. For some reason, about 10 or 15 minutes into the recording, Zero's audio just pitches down and he gets like a really deep voice. We decided to just upload it anyways because it's fully, it's still clear. You can still tell what he's saying. The conversation is still good. So just bear with that. It should be fixed by next week. So apologies for the weird deepness. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 9th episode of Kato's Anime Cafe, where every Monday we sit down and discuss anything and everything anime. I'm your host, Hoodie Song, as always, joined by my partner in crime, Zero. Today's episode is brought to you by the Tax Defense Group. The team of professionals at the Tax Defense Group are passionate about helping taxpayers resolve their tax debt. Their services include basic tax preparation, tax audits, resolving large tax debt, and more. They actively represent taxpayers throughout the entire USA, so if you need help resolving your tax issues, contact the Tax Defense Group. Call the Tax Defense Group today at 800-850-7973 to get started. That number again is 800-850-7973, or you could visit them online at thetaxdefensegroup.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Writer Junkie. Are you thinking about starting a business or a side hustle? For all businesses to be successful, you need a website. Writer Junkie offers website development, content writing, and SEO services for business websites. Call Writer Junkie today at 805-587-7966, and you can visit them online at writerjunkie.com. Thank you to the Tax Defense Group and Writer Junkie for sponsoring this week's episode. We also recently launched our website, ucaststudios.com. With articles about sports, special interest topics, and more, we have some cool stuff on the site. So to read our content, please visit ucaststudios.com. Now, let's get back into it. Zero, this week, the 6th episode of God of High School came out, marking the series' halfway point through the first season. This is the talk of the town, our Webtoons revolutionizing the anime industry. We're going to review what we've seen so far and find out, but first, can you tell us a little bit about what exactly God of High School is?
Of course. So, God of High School may sound a bit familiar if you've ever played like Tekken or Street Fighter or any fighting game, actually, because they all have the same plot and it's the same as this show. It's just a bunch of characters signing up for a fighting tournament for their own personal reasons. Maybe it's the prize, maybe it's the glory, maybe it's the pursuit of power, but they're all here for the fighting tournament. And I'd say the unique spin that this show sort of puts on that formula is that there's also the undercurrent of like them competing to be the protagonist. It's a show about who can be the most anime protag out of everyone.
So it is basically Tournament Arc, the show. I would say the Tournament Arc, when I think of anime that this is sort of borrowing from, I would say the closest I thought of was the Dark Tournament Arc from Yu Yu Hakusho. Obviously, Tournament Arcs exist in pretty much every shonen to ever exist and will ever exist. But to me, it felt like the whole conceit of, the strongest people gathering around for specifically the ability to grant a wish. That was something I identified specifically as being from Yu Yu Hakusho. Any other influences stick out to you? Obviously, this isn't like the most fresh concept, so there's going to be a lot of influences and a lot of generic influences. But anything
For sure.
oh yeah, this is definitely borrowing from this anime that I've seen.
Well, the one that stuck out to me, probably because of how like bare bones this concept is the Dragon Ball Budokai tournaments. And just like the way that the fights are mostly based on martial arts prowess, there's not a lot of anime magic happening. It definitely reminded me of like the early days of Dragon Ball.
The interesting thing, you say there's not a lot of anime magic. There
is some.
Isn't a power system. I mean, there seems to be, like, especially now with the 6th episode, so I should say spoilers here for all 6 episodes that have been released as of recording right now. Especially in this last episode, it does seem like we've seen a couple, eldritch horror type warlock powers so far, and it seemed like, okay, this is going to be the normal going into the next tournament after we finish the last one in episode 5. Episode 6 and further, we're going to see a lot of those, and it's going to build on that, and we're going to see more about what all that is. I kind of want to dial a little bit back to talk about the fact that this is a Webtoons and why that might be significant. So, for all of you guys who have been paying attention to the anime sphere, you might have seen Tower of God came out and finished about a month ago. It started a couple months prior to that. Tower of God very famous anime webtoon. Started, from my understanding, like 10 years ago. It's been going on that entire time. It's a very long story. It got its anime adaptation, received relatively well, and followed by that, we got God of High School, and then later on, we're getting another show called Noblesse, or Noble S. I don't really know how to pronounce it. Basically, webtoons are this very specific form of webcomic where instead of like turning pages, you're just scrolling down, and it's basically just one long vertical strip. The interesting thing about webtoons is they've amassed a unparalleled size, as far as I can tell. Like, I don't know the inside numbers of other comic book industries of how much manga are sold. I know like manga sales are public to some degree or another, but I don't really know much about it. As far as I can tell, webtoons are particularly huge in a way that is like an industry changing thing. So the dipping of their toe into anime does potentially signal a huge shift in what will be anime in the next 10 years. So obviously, most anime, if it's not an original, most anime is being adapted from manga. If these are successful, what we could probably expect to see is a whole slew of anime being adapted from webtoons instead. Now, is there practically that much difference? Probably not, because a lot of these webtoons are just anime inspired. So they're not like we're talking about here. God of High School is very much inspired from the tournament arcs of shonen anime that came before it. So, there's not going to be a huge difference, but there are some formal structural differences between how a webtoons reads and how a manga reads that we can get into as we do the review. But that is the gist of the significance of why this is so talked about, even though, as we both remarked, it's not really all that unique in any particular way. So, with that out of the way of why it's significant, let's talk about things we liked, things we disliked about God of High School. Zero, hit us off with something you liked about this show.
I will admit that I was a bit reluctant going into the show. I sort of expected it to just be generic battle shonen edition, and sort of just like a flavor of the month show that people talk about now, but probably won't be very important down the pipeline. So I was prepared to skip this show on that basis. However, watching it, forcing myself to watch it, I did come to appreciate this show's application of the formula. I mean, the name, God of High School, sort of gives the idea of the show away. That, that aspect that I was talking about where all of the characters present are very anime. I also forgot to mention that this is actually just the preliminary or a preliminary tournament for the main national tournament.
Yeah, so I guess the basic gist is that this is a tournament that spans all of Korea. So that is one of the particular trademarks of webtoons is that while they are a thing here in America and continue to rise in popularity in America, they are predominantly a Korean thing, and in Korea they are huge. So this was a Korean story to begin with. The national tournament is spanning all of Korea. What we saw in the first 5 episodes was one of the preliminaries for Seoul, which is the capital of Korea, and then moving into episode 6, where we left off on a cliffhanger, it's going into the winners. Our main characters of the Seoul preliminary are now going off against the 8 other teams from the other preliminaries.
Right. So, to get back into things I like about the show, I am a big fan of the martial art motif, and the fact that this show, where a lot of shows are about combat, but it's it's more about the power system than the actual muscle against muscle contest. So I like bringing back the martial arts. It's always been just sort of an interesting style of combat to watch. I enjoy that the main character is a Taekwondo practitioner. However, while this is something in the pro column for me, I also have fears that it might turn into a member of the con column down the future, because, as you hinted earlier, it does seem like they're opening the door for this magic system that, having no background with the actual webcomic, I don't know anything about how the magic system works, but I could see something like Naruto or actually Dragon Ball-esque happening, where it becomes more about the beam struggles than it does about the punching in the face.
Yeah, well, when we talk about being inspired by anime, unfortunately, a lot of times it's not just the positives, it's the negatives too. And
Indeed.
it seems like God of High School might not be immune to that. So talking about our experience with the comic, you've read none of it. I have read not much at all, but I will say, across the whole Webtoons genre, I have not read a ton. I've read my fair share, and I've also written a couple, but, I'm far from a seasoned expert. In watching this one, I did go back and skim some of the earlier chapters, particularly the latest couple, because I did want to see, like, okay, how is this being translated? How is this being adapted? And there are some interesting things. So first, I want to highlight that the God of High School director is a guy named, forgive my pronunciation, Sung-Hoo Park, who did key animation on Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Let's see what else. He directed the God of High School, and he did key animation on Zenki no Terror and Yuri on Ice. Those are the ones that I'm familiar with. He also has a lot of other work that I just don't know anything about. I was watching, Crunchyroll did like a series of videos maybe 2 weeks ago after one of the episodes, where they sort of did a behind the scenes look on how he wanted to do it. And one of the interesting things that he was talking about was that despite how fantastic, so you said there was no power system, or there wasn't any in the original 5 episodes, they still were very much like, they were not doing martial arts in human ways, they were doing martial arts in superhuman ways. And
anime martial arts is still
the interesting
fun.
thing that I saw was that in these behind the scenes videos, he was talking about how all of that was still pulled from real references. They had real martial artists come in and they motion track them, and they use that motion tracking to sort of be the base of their animation that they would then go on to, embellish for dramatic flair and whatnot. So when we talk about the greatness of some of these fights, which is one of the things that I have in my like column, which is that these fights are very, very impressive on an animation, on a choreographing level, all very good. I think a lot of credit goes to the director, Sung-Hoo Park.
I definitely back up that point. It's the fight scenes in the show are good. For now.
So the other thing, for now. The other thing I wanted to give a shout out, this wasn't a huge factor because I don't think it's like a pronounced aspect of the show, but it is something I noted on, particularly the first time I went through it, was I thought the soundtrack was very interesting. I liked it a lot. It had that sort of hip-hop flair you would expect from like a Samurai Champloo type show, and I ended up appreciating that a lot. The other thing I would say that I liked, it's not a long list because, well, first of all, it's we're only doing half the show so far that's out, and like we said, it's not like the most unique premise in the world. So the other thing, the last thing that I would say on my like category is I do think the characters are relatively endearing. They're not the most deep characters I've ever met. They're not like going on my top 25 list of all time or whatever. But that first episode where we see that scene of Jin Mori chasing after the thief because he stole from this old lady. It's a very generic scene, but I thought the twist they put on it, where it was Jin Mori had this like weird quirk where he sort of imagined the most tragic life for that grandma possible, and that like stirred his anger to go save the purse. I thought that was a unique twist. And I thought the girl jumping on his bike, I thought that was a really cool introduction. So I would say these characters,
she was T-posing.
Yeah, exactly. These characters are interesting. They're endearing. It's funny, not like hilarious, but it is, it's humorous. And I would say overall, I think the characters are good enough for me to be invested. Particularly, I would say the one I end up liking the most is, um, oh, what's his name? It's like Dai
Dai
something.
Wei.
It's the karate guy. He's like Turtle. Yeah, yeah. He is probably he has the most empathetic core with his dying slash dead friend.
Of
I would say he's
course.
the one I ended up attaching myself to the most.
I actually, speaking of their influences, God of High Schools, I definitely think this trio is influenced by Team 7. And of course, this tournament arc is probably influenced by the tuning exams. And I like this, uh, I can't think of the word, but the chemistry that these
Mm-hmm.
characters share. And even though no, like, singular character out of the three is, like, an instant favorite for me, I do very much enjoy seeing their interactions. I want to see what tests they're faced with throughout the course of
Is
this
there anything, because
series.
I'm about ready to go into things I dislike. Are there any things else that you want to like shout out as being a standout good thing for you?
I guess I'll say, before we get into dislikes, anything I don't mention is approved by omission.
Sure. Okay.
So I don't think this show is, like, more negative than positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the nature of review, particularly when it comes to things that aren't like mind-blowingly amazing, is that it is easier to point out the things that it did wrong than the points to point out the things that it just did okay. And generally, the okay stuff was okay. So going into things we
Exactly.
dislike, I do want to preface this a little bit because I want to again sort of talk about what Webtoons is, and this is less as a formal or structural thing, but what Webtoons is for creators and the industry surrounding that, because I think that plays a lot into the quality of the story we're seeing here. I basically want to contrast it with manga, which is the thing we have to remember when we're reading Webtoons and watching these anime is Webtoons is very much in its infancy. You know, it's been around for a decade at this point, but that's still a dwarfed amount of time compared to, you know, manga or comic books or whatever. So while these webtoons are not necessarily bad, they are the work of amateurs, and they are the work for a lot of these people. You know, these are probably their first stories, and unlike manga, which is this incredibly competitive, rigorous industry to get in that will only accept the most diligent professional mangaka, Webtoons is an open platform. It is very much like YouTube, where if you can publish whatever you want on Webtoons, assuming you own it and whatever, it's not like violating their terms of service. If the comic gets popular enough, if it gets big enough, it will probably get licensed. You will probably be offered a licensing deal by Webtoons themselves. Not definitely. I don't know how that works. I don't know the intricacies of that. But looking at their originals program, which is the Webtoons that they license, I could tell these are not the highest quality stories in the entire world. They're popular. They're not necessarily bad, but you can see that there is a lot of amateur, craftsmanship behind it. And these people will get better as the industry ages, but I do think that is something we need to remind ourselves when taking this stuff in. So, basically, when I talk about the things I dislike, what I'm going to say is basically just the story. The pacing, the structure, even like the concept beyond like, I'm fine with the simple it's just tournament arcs, but like all the cult stuff, I don't care about any of that. So when on a whole, I would say I pretty much dislike this whole thing from a writing perspective. I don't know if you would go that far, but that's about where I stand.
That is a bit harsh. I'm I don't know. I'm not too harsh on the actual pacing that we got. A lot of the concepts I'm not particularly astounded by, and like I said, this setting is pretty derivative. But I wasn't even gonna mention, like, writings in an abstract way on this dislike column. Mostly just like stuff that I personally disliked.
Okay, go ahead, give me one.
the first one I have written is actually just the intro or the opening. I'm not sure if you felt as strongly as I did about it, but
I feel the intro or the OP is 8 years too late. I think we are way beyond the time of like hardcore dubstep. We do not need this in our lives anymore. I will say, when it comes down to it, it does feel like a little bit of a guilty pleasure for me. Like I'm listening to it, it's like, oh, this is not good, but I can't turn it off. And I start to jam. I'm not gonna lie, I start to jam.
That is a much better reaction than I have to it, because I like, this is not good and I'm skipping it.
Well, I skip it all the time, of course, too, but that's just who I am as a person. And some might call that my fatal flaw, is that I skip anime OPs.
Yeah, a flaw we both share.
Yeah.
Secondly, Jin, Mori. Now, as a character, I don't think he's terrible, but I feel like out of all the anime boys and girls in this lineup, is he really the protagonist? He seems more to be like a character that a show like this would make fun of.
Well, I think...
know, like the guy who wants to be the protagonist, but clearly
here's
isn't.
why I think this is happening, is because this is not intentionally, I assume, but I think in amateurs' interpretation of a protagonist, of a shonen protagonist. And I think when we talk about the work of amateurs, we're talking about surface level interpretation. We're not talking about like actually understanding who, you know, Naruto, Deku, Goku, you know, Yusuke, not understanding who these characters are on a deeper level, but just, and this sounds a little harsh, but I think you could look at Jin Mori and be like, yeah, I see why you think this is a shonen protagonist. I don't know if he hits in the same way that actual good shonen protagonists do, though.
As harsh as it sounds, I'm forced to agree, at least based on, you know, what little we've gotten of his motivations and background. It seems like, you know, he got the strong guy who likes fighting copy-pasted from Goku, but he's not as compelling or interesting as the characters around him, which is actually a pretty common complaint when it comes to battle shonen protagonists, but I actually think it's often overstated. I feel like characters like Naruto and Ichigo and Goku, they have a lot going on under the hood.
Sure. I mean, listen, I just trashed him way harder than you did, so.
Yeah. I'm more talking to the listeners at this point than you, because if it was just us, I'd be like, look at this stupid ass Pikachu haircut.
I don't like his eyes. I don't like how his
I
eyes
don't like his eyes
at
all.
Weird yellow twinkle. And listen, if we're just talking small stuff that like I'm not really detracting from the actual quality of the show, but the noses being red and the ears are always swollen, and like I don't understand what this is adding and why you would draw it like this. Like, why? Do you know what I'm talking about? The ears, they're always so puffed up and big, and I don't get why.
I actually haven't noticed the ear thing, but the nose
just
definitely.
When you're watching next time, just look at their ears, because it's off-putting. It really is. I kind of want to talk about the pacing a little bit more, because the biggest reason I wanted to read the webcomic, I delayed us recording because I specifically wanted to go back and read some, is because of episode 4, which is, from what I can tell, the only universally, you know, questioned episode. Generally, this is pretty well received. Episode 4 is the one where people are like, I don't know about this one. Episode 4 is when, all in the span of one episode, they're walking home from the tournament. A random man we've never seen before pulls up, proposes to the swordsman character we know, I forget her name, Mira. He proposes to Mira. They're about to get married. They call off the marriage. There's a huge, you know, character developing moment between Mira and her uncle about like carrying on the legacy of the moon sword style or whatever. Then there's a huge fight with the with this proposed guy. Basically, a lot happens. A whole wedding arc happens in the span of one episode, and everyone watching can be like, "What is this? Why is this happen? Where did this come from? Why is this here? I don't get it." So I was like, let me go into the webcomic, see what's happening. Did they butcher this? Is this what it's like in the webcomic?
Why is
and
it
the
so
answer
fast?
is more or less it is. The pacing of the wedding did feel a little better in Webtoons form, though still it was jarringly fast, especially towards the beginning. And I feel like this goes back to a point I had brought up a long time ago, which is that, and this is one of the stylistic aspects of Webtoons that I think will be its biggest hurdle in being adapted later on, is that Webtoons, the scrolling format, gives the illusion of much longer content than it actually is. So when you talk about the first 5 episodes that came out of God of High School, we're talking about the first 25 chapters of the Webtoons. There's a huge difference. Yeah, there's a huge difference between someone who's watched a show for 5 weeks and someone who's been reading a comic for 25 weeks. You know, the level of engagement between these people is vastly different. And the expectations of these people are vastly different. So when I think, you know, whether or not this Webtoons experiment into anime will continue to work, my biggest thing that's, you know, drawing me back is that I don't know if these stories are structured in a way that will be great for anime. However, what I will say is I think the advantage of Webtoons in a way that manga isn't is the culture is not formed for Webtoons yet. In manga, I think it is very looked down upon to change the story, to change the writing anyway. Manga readers want faithful adaptations. We don't see that for comic readers. I mean, comic readers want faithful adaptations, but they've expected to not get those, and they are prepared to receive something else and still be happy. So I think Webtoons still has time to go the comic route and say, we're going to take the soul, the essence of God of High School, and we're just going to give it to a writer who actually knows what he's doing. And this writer will take it to, or he or she will take it to a professional degree. They're going to take the seeds of potential and they're going to give them what they actually, not even, you know, I'm coming at this insulting the writing of the webcomic, but what I actually mean here is even if the writing of the webcomic was good, it still might not be good for the anime. So I think Webtoons moving forward need to build a culture where they can actually revise and change and rewrite based on what the medium of anime will work better with. And I guess the pacing of the wedding, to me, while it is a problem in the Webtoons original format, I think that problem is exasperated in anime. So to me, that seems like a microcosm effect of this issue in like a, you know, really perfectly sized, understandable chunk.
Damn, you're really spitting right now. Because I too have been pondering the future of Webtoon anime. And I think it's going to, in some ways, resemble the rise of the light novel anime, where, like, stylistically, these shows, like, you can watch an anime, and I feel like an experienced viewer will be able to tell if a show was adapted from a manga or a light novel, or, you know, if it's like an anime original. And I feel like we're also going to get a similarly distinct style out of anime adaptations of Webtoons. Now, what that style will consist of, I think we've seen some instances of it, and I think this pacing issue, or I guess this pacing mistranslation, will be a part of that, because, as we discussed, anime that get adapted from Webtoons are adapting, like, tens of chapters in a single episode, with anime getting adapted from manga. It depends on like the manga and the show, but typically it can be as low as 2 chapters per episode,
Well,
or
it
as
can be as low as
high.
like 1.5. I mean, barring any
Yes,
filler stuff, there is examples of, we're doing a chapter and a half per episode type adaptations.
yeah, and I don't think I've ever seen an anime adapting at a rate greater than like 4 chapters per episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's just weird. It's Webtoons are in a weird spot that they're going to have to navigate on their own.
Yeah, and I think I don't know too much about behind the scenes. I think the fact that these are Crunchyroll adaptations, whatever that means, does potentially leave room for a change in culture. Obviously, Crunchyroll is it is the anime website, so it's going to borrow a lot from how anime production works. But by not necessarily being as involved in the industry as an actual, Japanese investor. I guess maybe I'm speaking something I don't really know. I guess what I'm putting forth is the idea that because it seems like Webtoons adaptations have outside money, it is possible they develop some level of outside culture, and I think that would ultimately probably be for the best, because I think they're emulating something that they probably cannot sustainably emulate without people being like, eventually there will come a time where people will just say, Webtoons adaptation, we all know how that looks. And, Tower of God
Yeah.
was fine. God of High School seems fine. But none of them, in my opinion, are blowing us out of the water.
Yeah, it just takes a few stinkers at the rate we're going to really sink this industry.
Yeah, so I kind of want to put us in closing thoughts.
Actually, I had another conversation topic I wanted to discuss, which was Webtoons that you would look forward to an anime adaptation of.
Well, let me tell you, there's this great one. It's called Embers. It was written by this guy named Hoodie Song. You should all check it out. It's
Embers by Hoodie Song. That's #1 on my list.
Wow. It was panned in the short story contest it was entered for. It was the gem that everyone.
It was
overlooked.
robbed, actually.
But I stand by it, and I think it is perfect in all ways.
It's the people's champion at the very least.
For sure. Embers would not make Embers, of course, jokes aside, is my fantasy webcomic. It's a short story, 4 chapters, about a young wizard creating her first golem. It would probably not make a good anime aesthetically. It seems more like a cartoon, but I suppose that's a minor difference. I don't actually know if I know many other webtoons that I think are primed for adaptation. I will say I don't want this to be an anime because the comparison I'm going to give it already is an anime. But I think there's this one I've been reading recently called Toaster Dude, which is, I've described it as the One Punch Man of Webtoons. We already have a One Punch Man of anime and manga, so we don't, and I guess One Punch Man is already a webcomic too. So,
yeah, One Punch Man is a webcomic.
We don't need another one adapted, but if you do really like One Punch Man, go read Toaster Dude. It's very, very funny.
Toaster Dude is an interesting submission. I don't know how well it would work as an anime. I mean, I feel like they should do basically 1 or 2 chapters per an episode, but they probably won't be able to because of time issues. There are actually 2 other webtoons that I've been reading pretty much religiously for like over a year at this point. The first that I ever got into, well, not ever, but that I'm still reading, is The Gamer, which very interesting world building, unique-ish power system.
That's because okay, listen, I've already developed opinion on webtoons, I think, and I think that might be it, where you go unique-ish, where it's like, I guess it kind of is.
There's creativity here, but there's also clearly derivation.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good answer for a webtoon I want adapted, because I don't think I've read enough actually good webtoons. I think there are some interesting stuff, but the only ones I can even think of like really standing out to me as webtoons I actually like, and I should also say that I've never read through an actual full webtoon because, God, it just takes so long. The scrolling format. That's why they're able to put out such short chapters, is because the scrolling format, like, it really artificially lengthens how long these chapters are, and it just takes so long to read. So I have not read all of Lore Olympus, but I've read the first few chapters, and I think it is a very interesting story with a very unique, actually unique style and presentation. I don't think any of that necessarily translates to an actual anime adaptation. I suppose it could be a cartoon or whatever, but I think what I'm referring to specifically is like paneling and stuff. So, you move it to a medium without panels, and I'm less interested personally. So yeah, I don't think I have a good answer for this.
I would recommend The Gamer. I think it would probably work. The one that I think would definitely work, and the webtoon that has also become sort of just like one of my weekly manga that I look forward to reading the most, is Tales of Demons and Gods. It's definitely filled the gap of like Naruto in my heart, which is very big praise coming from me. A lot of people have low opinions of Naruto. I think it's like a solid 7 or 8 out of 10. More like solid 7, light 8 to go by Fantano institutions.
Sure. Where is this? Where do I read this?
Tales of Demons and Gods. I just pirate it, so
okay.
I don't know where you would read it.
I don't even know where it is, but I will definitely look this up because I also love Naruto, believe it or not.
It's very good, and I think an anime for it would work really quite well.
Okay, all that stupid discussion out of the way. Thank you very much for bringing up your discussion point. Let's go into our closing thoughts on God of High School. I want to phrase it in this question, which is how I originally discussed this show with you, which is I said, all I expected from the show was 22 minutes of pure hype, Sakuga-filled tournament arcs, and that would be enough for me. And now, having seen 6 episodes of the show, I'm more harsh on the plot and the actual story structure than you are, but I would say we both probably agree to some degree or another that the highlight of this show is its fight scenes and animations. So the question I have is, was I right? Is that enough? Is 22 minutes of pure hype, Sakuga-filled fighting, is that enough for us to continue enjoying the show? I pose the question to you.
I'd say it depends on whether or not you feel you need more anime in your life. And I think whether you fall on either side of that line is fine. For me personally, I think this is a worthy addition to my weekly watch list.
I think for me personally, it's largely going to depend on this next episode, which is, where we left off in episode 6 is another fight was about to begin now in the actual national tournament. And it's this thing we've hit on multiple times in this review, which is, are we moving away from martial arts into a Naruto-esque, laser beams, not like spiritual mechs type things,
yeah.
Are we getting too big for our breeches? I don't know what the term is. Britches. If we could stay within the realm of martial arts, I would say this is still worth watching because it genuinely does look good. I mean, going back to episode 5, the big climactic fight between the two main characters where it went into like a paintbrush, ink, black and white style of animation. I thought that was something I don't think I've ever seen that before, and it looked really, really good. Like, it looked genuinely amazing. So with that in mind, I would say if it does stay within this realm of fight styles, I would say it's worth continuing to watch for me. If we go in the direction of everyone just has stands and they're all demon fighting, I mean, there's only 12 episodes, so I'll probably finish the season, but I will not be excitedly waiting for season 2.
I'm not dropping it. That's exactly where I am on this show right now. Not dropping it.
You live another day.
Yes.
All right, let's close this out with a quick final segment. We're going to do some shout outs to new things in the anime sphere right now that we think you guys should be paying attention. Oh my god, I just butchered that entirely.
Attention.
You guys should be paying attention to. There we go. Zero, what is something cool happening recently in anime that you think people need to check out?
Well, since this was a Webtoons episode, I was gonna recommend Toaster Dude, but you totally screwed me on that one.
Nice, dude. Toaster Dude is good.
I'm gonna recommend.
Are you just gonna resolve for that answer, or are you changing?
I'm changing it to something else I already talked about, which is Tales of Demons and Gods. If you're a Battle Shonen fan, you shouldn't be sleeping on this.
All right. I'll do something not an anime to watch, but r/anime, Reddit r/anime has started their next writing contest, which includes sections for essays, reviews, and videos. So you'll probably see us entering something, and I think you guys definitely should. This is a great opportunity, for some smaller creators to get their work out there and potentially even win some cool gift cards. So I'm gonna shout out r/anime's writing contest.
Cool.
All right. I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of Kato's Anime Cafe. I want to give a quick shout out again to this week's sponsors. Thank you, Writer Junkie and the Tax Defense Group for sponsoring the Anime Cafe, and thank you to everyone listening. You can catch us uploading every Monday to UCast Studios' YouTube channel or your favorite podcast apps. I've been your host, Hoodie Song, with my partner, Zero. Until next time.
さよなら。